Hello again to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. You're listening to Obsidian Radio. So, alright, this is the third episode of Season 4 that I'll be reviewing. The episode entitled Door of Hope of Attack on Titan, where we see the breaching of Wall Maria from Reiners' point of view. This was an extremely good episode that showcased who a lot of characters were from their more formative years. And I must say that this is pretty eye-opening to see how people can retain the same behavior since their childhood. I'll say it's almost spooky. There were a few things that are off about this episode that I hope they fix when the Blu-ray version comes out. Other than that, this was a very good breakdown of who Reiner is and why he became the way he is now. In fact, I'd argue that Reiner needs his own video, a character study video going through all the things that he's done as well as suffer throughout the series. Let's get into this. My first thoughts is as soon as the episode opened, I immediately felt cringe, sadness, curiosity, and a deep empathy or sympathy for Reiner's character. Throughout most of this episode, I saw what a traumatizing childhood can do to a person, how it affects them, how it shapes them, how it damages them. And this episode did a splendid job of showcasing that. What war does to humans, how segregation based off a false narrative or ignorant ideas can ruin people, how a human being's spirit can be irreversibly destroyed by choices not their own. Another slightly slower paced episode that really showed us who these characters are on the inside. Unfortunately, there are a few complaints I have about this episode, but we'll get into that a little bit later when it comes to them taking out some scenes. But overall, it was still a pretty good episode. Could have been better, but pretty solid ultimately. So let's get into it. The plot. So this episode starts out with Reiner's mother speaking to him when he's in bed. I think he's like maybe 8 or 9 years old. I don't know how old he is, but he's very young here. And she's telling him that he needs to become a warrior. He needs to become an honorary Marleyan. So that way he and his mother can live a better life. They don't have to be looked down upon anymore as Eldian devils. We see Reiner go through some really harsh training, some harsh struggles in the recruitment camp for the warrior program. We see other cadets who are about to inherit the future Titan forms. We see the friction between Reiner and Porco. We eventually see Reiner somehow get chosen to obtain the armor Titan, to Porco's dismay. We then see this excellent sequence where each of the 6 Titans displayed their main combat abilities while actually taking over an enemy city for the Marleyan government. We then see the military parade where at some point Reiner's father disowns him and wants absolutely nothing to do with him. Or Reiner's mother, his father disowns him and his mother because he doesn't want his families to find out that he ever got with an Eldian woman over a decade ago, and she had a child with him. So he's completely disconnected from Reiner, and his mother hasn't wanted to do with them, and that's a really disgusting thing that ultimately just crushes Reiner for a bit until Reiner comes to another realization that he doesn't need to become a warrior for his father. He needs to become a warrior for Marley and his mother. This is still a good cause for him if he has no father, according to him. Really messed up mentality. But yes, really good character development though. So the 4 of them, Marcel, Reiner, Annie, and Bertolt, they go out to the island where Marcel sacrifices himself to save Reiner. The last 3, the trio, they breach the Wall Maria, spend the next 5 years trying to obtain and then failing to retrieve the founding Titan. We then are greeted with an intense scene. A flashback of Reiner helping and motivating a struggling Eren Yeager. We're in the boat training with the scouts. Or not the scouts, but they're in the training class or training school to become fighters against the Titans later on. I can't remember what it's called. Then this scene of Reiner and Eren holding hands, Reiner helping Eren, is intercut with Reiner, the current Reiner, attempting suicide with a rifle. Right when he's about to pull the trigger, Falco shows up and bangs on the door. And that's when Reiner decides at the last minute to not pull the trigger. Falco is then seen sitting next to the one-legged, one-eyed veteran, or what we assume is a veteran, on a park bench. This person, the amputee, tells Falco that during all this pain, this misery, and this heartbreak, the destruction from war, that one major thing that we can all do in this world is to move forward. And that's how the episode ends. Interesting things that I noticed. There were quite a few things I noticed in the episode that were excellent, as well as some things in the episode that I thought were heartbreaking, story-wise, and a bit disappointing in terms of production. One, they did a good job extending the profiles of each of the 6 Titans under Marleyan control, the Warriors. The manga only just showed what they vaguely did. It didn't go into detail like that. Whereas in the episode 3, they showed specifically what each Titan had, what their powers were, what they did, their strengths, and their main fighting style, as far as usage, and as also the usage in the battle campaign. I also really liked the cutaways that showed them in the lineup next to the diagrams of their Titan forms. 2. I also found it highly troubling that Reiner tried so hard to reach out to his own father, but because Reiner's father had slept with an Eldian woman more than a decade ago, and she had his child, he wants nothing to do with her. Only because of the bad reputation of being with an Eldian more than a decade ago. So, as far as he's concerned, he disowned both of them and wants nothing to do with them at all. If that's not set up for a well-written but very tragic character, I don't know what is. Number 3. The one thing I was really disappointed in is after Reiner chose out Annie, the entire sequence got cut out. The entire sequence where Annie's the one that transforms and races towards Walmaria. She then switches with Reiner and he continues the race until Berto comes in and smashes open the wall. That whole entire thing was cut out for ultimately what was obvious reasons. Mappa's on a budget, like any other studio, and there was a time constraint. The episodes are only allowed to be about 22 minutes long, so that's all they can do. So that portion's left out. Although I do sincerely hope and pretty sure that in the Blu-ray version, that sequence is going to get added back in somehow. I hope that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen some way. I like that sequence because it really highlighted so much of stress that each of them were going through when they were trying to complete that mission. 4th thing that I noticed. We're ultimately getting a version of events from the Marleyan side through Reiner's eyes. Something that's harder to do when it comes to writing a story. But as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to storytelling, Attack on Titan has done a splendid job of creating a really nice, nuanced, and complex narrative. We really do see this insane, cruel world from multiple different viewpoints. 5th thing. This might be overthinking, but am I the only one who notices the tree next to the bench where Falco and that one soldier are sitting looks a lot like, I don't know what you call those, but they look a lot like those lights or those branches, those electrical things that Ymir saw in season 2, right after she obtained the Jaws Titan. If you go back and check, you'll see they look kind of similar in their shape and their proportions, I should say. And the 6th thing, just like in my previous video in episode 2, where I mentioned that I might do a character analysis on Reiner in a separate video. In fact, I might do character analysis on a lot of different characters that I'm interested in, including the ones that I dislike. I might do another one on Porco and why I think he actually shouldn't have been on the Warrior Squad at all. When I look at his behavior, he just didn't seem suited to be a holder of any of the Titans, from my perspective. When looking at his extremely angry, immature, and overly reactive attitude. He so far has gotten on my nerves this entire time, more than any other warrior in Marley's military empire. Now, as far as the animation quality. As far as the animation goes, like I've stated earlier, I'm liking the slightly less contrasted but more hazy look to the art style. It really gives a lot of scenes this more matured, intense, real world feel to it in the episodes, in a way that the first 3 seasons didn't. Although Wit Studios' animation was fantastic, in my opinion, it was more fancy looking. It was highly contrasted art style. Whereas this season seems to be more grounded in reality when it comes to what the characters and what the scenes look like. We'll be speaking more about this animation this season as the season progresses. Best thing about the episode. Absolutely best thing about this episode was seeing everything that motivated Reiner to do what he's doing in this entire time. This type of character development is incredibly well written, really encapsulate what happens during war, what happens with extreme self-hate, when people grow up in traumatic childhoods, people deal with things like extreme segregation in empires, under military empires, and it also shows us what the main motivators are that drive child soldiers to do what they do. This episode doesn't show us who Reiner is on the inside. It doesn't just show us who Reiner is on the inside. It also shows us what conflicts and trauma do to human beings who haven't been fully matured or haven't fully grown yet, and how spiritually and psychologically devastating these effects are once they're observed. Worst thing about the episode was the fact that entire sequence was cut out. When it came to all three warriors breaching Walmaria, they skipped the Annie transformation. They skipped when they when they switched from her to Reiner, and went ultimately led to Bertolt smashing open the wall when he kicked it, to when he had the smiling titan walking past him, to when Reiner picked up Bertolt and Annie and brought them to the top of the wall. They skipped that entire sequence, and I really hope they bring that back in the Blu-ray version later on as the series progresses. Just gonna have to wait and see. As far as my favorite scene, I'll say my absolute favorite scene was the entire sequence of Marley profiling the 6 Titans when they sent them out to what appears to be their first military campaign. But there's also a second scene where Reiner pulls out the rifle from his mouth and decides not to off himself. Heartbreaking and very bold, very mature storytelling as far as I'm concerned. As far as a 1 to 10 score, I'll give this episode a 9 or 9.5 out of 10. But I'll give it 8.5 instead. Only because too much of it, that really big sequence of Annie, Reiner, and Bertolt running to Walmaria was cut out. That's such an important sequence that I wish they could have kept in, but they couldn't. So, like I said, it just adds more to the storyline, adds to the situation. It adds more to their psychology and what they're trying to do. And I really hope they put in the Blu-ray later on when the Blu-ray of this episode comes out. So, like I said, I know they're under constraints, but I really hope that scene comes back in some way. Very good sequence. Now, as far as overall summary of the episode, I liked it. I thought it was a pretty good episode. It showed the psychological effects of war. It showed the damage that has been done to what's quickly becoming one of my favorite characters in the story, Reiner Braun. It profiled Marley as well as what their main goals are. It displayed a really well done character development through well-placed flashbacks, as well as it showed us the whole entire conflict from another perspective. This episode could have been better if it just didn't cut that entire sequence out where the trio's running towards Walmaria getting ready to breach it. Other than that part, pretty good episode, solid. And with that being said, that's all for now. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate to support this channel. You all have a nice day. I'm out. Peace.